Hello guys. In this video, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to perform a navigation from that of the master page to that of the detail page. So whenever I'm going to select an item over here, I'm going to take that value that I have selected and I'm going to give that more information about this selected item into my detail page. So this is what I'm going to do today. And to do this, I'm going to make use of this router with the help of which I'm going to navigate to the detail page. So first thing what I wanted to do is I will go ahead and I will implement an event handler for this where I will get to know what is the selected item. Then from that I will be able to navigate to the detail page with the help of this um, routing concept. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my master view where I'm going to add an event handler method to this object list item where I'm going to name this for where I'm going to create an event handler method for this event press where I'm going to handle this as handle SO detail. So I create an event handler here which I'm going to call it as handle SO detail, and as usual as any event handler it is going to import this event object. So navigate to detail page. So here what I'm going to do is the first thing I wanted to get to know the value which I have obtained so that I can navigate to the detail page with that particular value. So to do that, first I'm going to get the source of the event where whichever the value that I have selected, that is going to be the source because I have assigned the event handler at the item level itself. So if I read the source information, that will give me whichever the item that has been selected. So from the event object, I'm going to get the item instance as from the event object by triggering this method get source, I'm going to get the item instance. Then from the item, I'm going to get what is the value that has been selected. So to get that, I'm going to read the context information as from the item reference that I have obtained. I'm going to call this method binding context where by calling this method binding context, I get which item does this binding sorry to which row in the model this item refers to. So that information I get it as a context. So since this is a default model, I'm not passing anything to this method. If it is a named model, I have to pass the name of the name of the model inside this method so as to get what is the value that is available there. Then from there to get the data, I'm going to read the data as from the o context object. I'm going to call this method get object with which I'm going to read the data. So I have read this data over here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger the navigation. So in order to trigger the navigation, I need the instance of this router. So since I would be needing the instance of the router at multiple locations, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the router instance and I'm going to put it in a global variable. So in the onInit function as a one-time activity, I'm going to put this router by creating a global variable in the controller. I'm going to store the instance of the router where I'm going to get the router instance as sap.ui.core.ui component dot get router for is a method where I'll pass the controller reference and I will get the router for this. So now that I have obtained the router, with the help of this router instance, I will trigger the navigation pattern. So which pattern I wanted to navigate to. So in order to trigger the navigation pattern, first I have to create the pattern here. So I will go to this component.js, and here we already have an empty pattern, which is a default pattern, in which case we are navigating to the master target where we are navigating to the master view. So likewise, I'm going to create a one more destination, a one more route specifying that whenever this pattern matches, let's say I'm going to give the name of the pattern as detail, then I'm going to give the name as detail. Also, I'm going to give the target as detail, where I'm indicating that whenever this pattern matches, you have to go to this particular target. So I'm going to create a target over here, which I'm going to call it as a detail, where I'm going to give the view name as I wanted to navigate to the detail view, which I'm about to create later sometime. Then I'm going to specify that the control aggregation that I wanted to place this is in the detail pages aggregation. So I'm placing this view in the detail pages. So what I have told the system is that whenever I'm going to trigger this pattern, you trigger this target. So in this target, I have indicated that a detail view is to be placed and it has to be placed in the detail pages of the split tab container. So to navigate there, I'm just going to create a view here, which I'm going to call it as a detail view. And the mode of development is going to be XML, and I click on finish. So as usual, I will specify the path from the sales order component. And then here I will just change the title to sales order detail, and this I will extend from the base controller. So I'll just copy this code. So where I'm declaring here is I'm declaring the detail controller, which has to be inherited from the base controller. By extending the base controller, I'm creating my detail controller. So I have referenced the detail controller over here. Now I have the pattern which is available for me to be triggered. So whenever I wanted to navigate to this particular pattern, what I have to do is that in the place where I wanted to navigate, I have this router information as this dot o router. So in this, I'm going to trigger this method now to where I'm going to tell the system that what is the name where I wanted to trigger. So the pattern that would matching this would be this pattern, and when this pattern matches I wanted to go to this target, and when this target comes I wanted to take this detail view and I wanted to put it in detail pages aggregation. So I have specified that whenever I select a particular item I get the data. So I haven't done anything with the data as of now, but still with the router object I'm just triggering the navigation pattern to detail. So this pattern triggers. From there, I identify the target. Then from the target, I specify that this is the view I wanted to navigate and I wanted to put it into the detail pages. So to test this, I will just submit the changes. And we will reload our application. So I'll just debug it. So as of now, only the master view has been loaded. So I'm just going to select this. When I select this, it comes to the respective event handler method where I get the source information. So where I get the source information, then once I have got the source information, from that I get the context value where you can see this context value, it points to the model and the path in the model. So that is how the context is being formed. So if you see here the model, the data will be stored in the model as the path that you see over there in the S path. So that is how the model will store the values. Sorry, the context will store the values, the model and the path in the model. So from the context I get the data which is selected. So by calling this get object method I get the data as an object, where if you see this you will be able to see it as an object where I get the information about the sales order header. So I have obtained the data, but now I'm not doing anything with the data. Instead I'm just triggering this pattern. So when I trigger this pattern, you could see that by default in the URL there is nothing, it's empty as of now. But after I trigger this pattern, you could see that the URL has been appended with the segment value detail, which is a pattern that I have given over there. And when this pattern in the URL matches, the router by default triggers this and the target has been reached, where my target is that I wanted to place this detail view in the detail pages aggregation. And here you can see that my detail view is being placed in the detail pages aggregation. So I have done my navigation over here. The next thing that I wanted to do is that whenever I navigate here, I just navigated to the detail view. But what I would want is that I wanted to take the value from here, and with that value, I wanted to navigate to the detail view. So to take the value and to navigate with that particular value, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to expand this routing, where what I'm going to do is in this routing I'm also going to pass a parameter. I put a slash to specify the path, and in this I'm going to create a parameter, and the parameter will be created within the curly braces, where I'm going to add a parameter called sales order ID. So now when I navigate to this detail pattern, I can also pass this parameter sales order ID. So in the master controller where I'm going to navigate it, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass this value as a second parameter, where I'm going to say that what is the value for this sales order ID parameter, which I have defined in this routing configuration. So here I'm going to say that from the OData object which I know that I have this object called parameter called sales order ID, which I will be passing as a routing parameter. So now I have passed this value, and now this value will be navigated over here. But in the detail view, I should be able to capture that value, and accordingly I should be able to get the data. So what I will do is I will go to the detail view, And in the detail view, on init function, I'm going to get the reference of the router, where I'm going to say this dot o router is equal to sap dot ui dot core dot ui component dot get router for this. So I get the router reference. Then with the help of the router reference, I'm going to interpret the value which is coming inside, and I'm going to generate my data accordingly. So to do that, if you go over here and if you look at this routing object, there is an event called route pattern match, which is an event which will get triggered when the pattern matches. For example, when I'm navigating from the master to detail, when the detail pattern matches, what is the event handler method that has to be triggered when the pattern matches? So what I'm going to do here is that now that I have the instance of the router, with the instance of the router, I'm going to specify that whenever this detail view is going to be loaded, whatever is the pattern that is matching for this detail view, I wanted to handle the event for that. So I wanted to interpret the value that is coming inside this view. So to do that, it has this method called attach root pattern match, with which I'm going to attach an event handler method. So the event handler method that I'm going to name it as handle root pattern match, and then the second parameter I'm going to pass the controller reference itself. So I'm going to create an event handler method with this particular name, which I will be assigning as an event handler method for this pattern match event. So I specify this method over here, and as any event handler, it imports this event object, root matched event, and inside this I'm going to get the values. So for now I'm just going to place a debugger here, and I'm going to submit these changes. So whenever I select a data over here, what I do is that I take this data of the sales order ID and I pass it while navigating. So now you could see that when I navigated, it came to the detail view. So it would have executed this on init function, where it has registered this method as a event handler method that should be triggered when the route matches. So you could see that the route has been matched here in this case, and it has stopped over here. So if I check this event object, it has the attribute called, it has a parameter called argument, which contains what is the value that I have passed from the master view to the detail view. So with this value, I'm going to reform the binding context, and I'm going to display the value in the detail view. So what I will do here is I'm going to say variable sales order ID is equal to o event dot get parameter, where I get the parameter with the name arguments, because I know that this is the one that is having the value. So from this arguments, what I wanted is that when that object has been obtained, from this argument I only wanted this sales order ID. So I have taken this sales order ID. Then I'm going to form the model. So to get the model instance, I'm going to say it like variable o model is equal to this dot get view of get model. So this will give me the model instance. Then I'm going to form the binding path. So for forming the binding path, I'm going to specify it as, I know that sales order set is the entity in which I want this particular record. So like I shown you previously, the context path would be sales order set, where it would be something like this, 50000 something of this value. So I need to form that here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to form a string up to this, whereas the sales order number is something that I have obtained as an importing parameter here, which I will put it over here, and then I'll put a single quote, and I will close it. So basically I have formed this value path as by concatenating. Then now that I have the model and the path that is required, I'm going to create the context, where I'm going to create the context as new sap.ui.model.context, where I use this model instance and I specify the path. So like I showed you previously, the context is nothing but the combination of model and the path in the model. So if you see here, it takes the model and the path. So with the help of this, I have created the context. In some cases, when you're navigating directly to the detail view, your context may not be obtained. So in that case, what you need to do is that the context will be obtained only when the data that you're looking for is already available in the model. If the data that you're looking for is not available in the model already, then this statement will not form you the context. So in that case, you will have to reload the data and you have to set it back into the model, and again you have to form the context. So in this case, you have to read the data again and recreate the context. So for you to do this, you need to implement get entity method. So we have only implemented the get entity set method so far. We have not actually implemented this get entity method, that we will do later on. So if the context is already available to us, then what we will do is that I will get the reference of the view, and to the view I will um, set this context as the binding context. So I'm going to say set binding context of O context. Whatever the context information that I have, I set it as a binding context. So then what I will do is, in the view, I'm going to create some control where I'm going to make use of this object header to display the sales order header information, where you can see that this is exactly similar to that of your object list item, where it has the same properties like title, number unit, then the attributes, first status, exactly similar to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this object list item and I'm going to paste it over here. So since the property are exactly same, I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'm just going to change the control alone. Then it does not have this event handler, so I will just remove this. Then here we already have this formatter, so that formatter was only imported into the master view. So to import that formatter into the detail view, what I will do is I will just go here and add this formatter here, sales order slash util slash formatter, where I'm going to import it with the name formatter, and I'm going to say underscore formatter is equal to formatter, because here we are using with the name underscore formatter. So I put it as a private variable. So what I will do now is I will just submit these changes, and I will refresh this application now. So whenever I select a value here, you could see that the context here is formed with the combination of model and what is the path it is pointing to. So since I cannot pass this complete object over there, what I'm basically doing is I'm only passing the sales order ID information, and when that sales order ID information is matching, I'm just getting the sales order ID, whatever I have passed from there. Then I get the model instance. Then I form the path. So where I form the path as like I showed you in the previous master view, where this is how the path has been formed. So just like this, I have created my own path. Now I have the path as well as I have the model. So from the model instance, I am forming this context once again, where you can see this. The context is pointing to the model instance and the path it is referring to in the model. So that row of value, whatever I have obtained as a context, I'm giving it to the detail view so that the detail view gets the data from that, and it should have displayed the value, but it didn't happen. Let us check why. So let me check this here. Hmm, Set binding context of o context, which is right. Then what did we miss here? So I'll go here and I will debug it from here. Object header. This for binding. Okay, so that was some sort of refresh issue. So I just cleared the cache and I executed it again. It seems to be working fine. So what we have basically done is that in the detail controller, we just obtain this context, and we have set this binding context as a context instance for this detail view. So after refreshing this application, you could see that whenever I select the value, that particular value has been displayed in the detail view. So we will extend this application further and we will display the item details of the sales order as well. So that we will be doing it in the next video. So thanks for watching. Have a nice day.